Hello, and welcome to BodyShop News Australia's October 2021 webinar, EVs, Are You Ready to Repair? My name is Albert Malik, and I'm the Managing Editor at BodyShop News. I'd like to begin by thanking our sponsors, without whom this event wouldn't have happened. A big thank you to 3M, Anest Iwata, ProSpot, and Sherwin Williams Automotive Finishes. And now I'd like to go through a little bit of housekeeping. To ensure that you can experience the webinar properly, we suggest you use a laptop or a desktop computer and make sure you're connected over a high-speed internet connection. Try to use Firefox or Google Chrome to watch this webinar, as you'll get the best experience. There shouldn't be a problem if you're using Apple Safari or Microsoft Edge, but if you do have any issues, give Chrome or Firefox a try. If at any point the audio or video gets stuck or you have problems, try refreshing your browser. In Windows, you can press F5 on your keyboard, and if you're using a Mac, you can press Command R to refresh. On the right side of your screen, you should be able to see a white pane with a set of tabs. If you can't see this pane, click on the icon in the bottom right corner of your screen. You should see the Chats tab first. Feel free to chat with us and the attendees here. In the Questions tab, you can post questions you want to ask the panel. The questions will be visible to the panel during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. You can also upvote any of the questions already in the Questions tab if you want to ask the same question listed in the queue. Finally, we're going to do some live polls later, and they'll show up in the Polls tab. They'll appear during the course of the webinar, so take a look there when the time comes. Now then, let's get started. I'd like to welcome Michel Malik, publisher of BodyShop News and moderator of our webinar today. Michel?
Thank you, Albert, and good afternoon to all of you, and good evening to those in New Zealand, and good morning in Europe and in the Middle East. My name is Michel Malik. I'm the publisher of BodyShop News in Australia and around the world. I've been involved in automotive for more than 40 years. I present a radio program called The World on Wheels since 1996. I'm a car enthusiast. I collect cars. I compete in motorsport, and collision repair is my life. So welcome to our webinar, and please allow me to introduce you to my fellow panelists. Robert Snook, he's a genuine collision industry fan with 37 years industry experience. He's also the global conference moderator for IBIS. He is the group director for MG Cannon. It's a multi-award winning UK MSO body shop with 8 sites and 38 vehicle manufacturer brands approved within the group. He's also the group director for Business Success Global. It's a training and mentoring company. He's a respected businessman, speaker, moderator, coach, whatever you want. He's been there everywhere. He's held senior management, business owner level roles, corporate, private companies. What more can I say? Welcome aboard, Robert.
Thank you, Michel. Good afternoon, everyone.
Also on our panel is Andrew Marsh. Andrew is a respected and sought-after global speaker in the collision repair industry. He's a regular contributor to BodyShop News magazines. He writes a column every month for us in all our editions. He was previously the automotive engineering manager at Thatcham, and then he saw the light and he became a founding member of Auto Industry Consulting. He launched the Ezi-Methods in 2012, and they cover nearly 1,000 models today. But before everything else, he's a mechanical engineer. He's been involved in design, development, project management for car manufacturers for more than 20 years. Welcome again, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Also on our panel is Dominic Mazzeo. Dominic is from B&A Motor Body Repairs in Melbourne. He's been raised in a family-owned body shop. He's done his apprenticeship back in 1999. He's worked on the floor for 10 years. He's also an ICAR Platinum individual with structural aluminium welding certification. He's worked along OEM engineering and styling departments. He's completed diplomas in frontline business management, and he's a veteran of multiple manufacturer-based training sessions. Welcome aboard, Dominic.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Lockdown Melbourne.
Hey, we're out of lockdown. Last but not least is Steve Harvey. Steve is a qualified light vehicle technician. He's also a trainer and an assessor. He's a Nissan High Performance GTR and Master Technician accredited. He's Nissan Australia's fixed operations specialist, and he's been with Australia since 2015 as a technical specialist and product training specialist, but he's been with the Nissan brand since 2006, various dealerships as workshop foreman and high performance technician. Thank you for your time, Stephen, and welcome aboard.
Thanks, Michelle, and good afternoon, everyone. Really excited.
Well, today we're going to have a panel. We're going to talk about EVs. Obviously, are we ready to repair EVs? So we have a 3-segment webinar today. So we're going to have 3 questions. Obviously, EVs and hybrids. One is what's the difference? The other one is how to repair EV. How does repairing EVs affect what we do now? And what do I need to do to manage the change into EVs? So I'm going to start first section with Andrew. And Andrew's going to tell us the difference between the MHEV, BEV, PHEV, HEV. All yours, Andrew.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to begin by looking at our first picture. And we're going to start with the mild hybrid electric vehicle, MHEV. Now, this has an engine, it has a transmission, conventional drive. It also has a smart alternator, which is able to restart the engine when it's hot and also send power to a battery pack, which is located on the underside of the body or inside the passenger compartment. Typically, these systems run at anywhere between 12 and 48 volts. But the idea is that the system can gather energy and also give back energy. There's no external supply of electricity. And you'll see it's got a relatively small battery, 0.2 to 1 kilowatt hour in that kind of range. And that's in addition to the 12-volt battery. So now let's have a look at a hybrid. The next slide, please. So that one has a slightly bigger battery. And this time, the electric motor, it has an electric motor, which is inside the transmission. So this vehicle is able to use mechanical drive from the engine and transmission, or the electric motor feeding into the same transmission. And so what it can do is drive for maybe 5 to 10 kilometers on electric-only power. So it can do its party trick of swooshing out of a car park silently. It has, again, no ability to accept energy from outside the vehicle. So the engine is charging the battery, and also on braking, the regenerative braking is putting energy also into the battery pack as well. So this is where Toyota began with Prius, and it grew from there in 1997. Typically, the battery packs are air-cooled, and the power controller, which sits on top of the transmission at the front, and the electric motor elements of that will be water-cooled. So we're already seeing complexity, and in terms of voltage, the battery will be running at circa 100 to 200 volts DC. But around the motor and the power controller, we'll have synthesized AC, which again can run from anywhere from 100 up to 800 volts. So this system is way more complicated and a little more scary. Let's look at the next version. And that is the plug-in electric hybrid vehicle, PHEV. Now, this has a bigger battery pack. I've put here a range of 5 to 30 kilowatt hours. Some are even bigger than this. Here, we can have electric-only driving for 30, 40 or so kilometers. And there's more performance available where the engine is working as before with the hybrids. The engine and the electric motor can work together to boost acceleration and aid driving. The key difference here, apart from the size of the battery pack, is that we can apply electricity from outside the vehicle, as well as energy generated by the internal combustion engine. So one thing we need to bear in mind before we talk about our next category is that roughly 1 kilowatt hour of battery power, the pack, costs circa 200 Australian dollars. The retail is significantly higher, of course. And with more advanced chemistries, that figure can be double or treble that rate. So that's why everybody talks about the batteries, because the battery is probably the single most expensive component in this system, particularly with PHEV. And now we're going to look at BEV, battery electric vehicles. Here we see the typical location for the battery pack is underneath the floor. So the body now is re-engineered for an EV powertrain. And the power range is between 30 and going past 120 kilowatt hours. There's some manufacturers who are racing each other to see who can get the biggest battery in a passenger vehicle. And of course, when we go to bus and truck, these batteries get even bigger. So the key difference here is the power only comes from outside. There's no ability to generate power inside the vehicle, except with energy recovery with regenerative braking. And the other important thing is that we can plug and play the drive. So it could be a two-wheel drive vehicle or a four-wheel drive vehicle. It's relatively flexible to create this from the manufacturing point of view. There are also key differences we see on the BEV and the PHEV, where we start to see the cooling system in the battery is also liquid and can also involve the air conditioning system. And that with BEVs, because we're trying to optimize energy, we start to see things like heat pumps and the use of carbon dioxide as a refrigerant. Okay, that's a kind of summary of the progression of the four main categories of electrified vehicles.
Thank you, Andrew. That's very, very explanatory. Can I just ask you very quickly, which of these will be the most common and so most likely to appear in body shops, and why?
So in the first step, dependent on incentives and so tax regimes, whether one wants to work in a major city like Melbourne, Sydney, or elsewhere, forgive me, to all the other major cities. In a major urban area, it may be worth considering for other reasons because of prevailing taxation. So in the short term, without many incentives, MHEV will be the most common. And that will gradually change over the next 5 years towards significantly different hybrids, more effective hybrids. And then over another 10 years, I would suggest, when we will start to see a majority of battery electric vehicles. So that kind of gives you migration. We won't switch suddenly to battery electric vehicles.
Thank you, Andrew. Steve, what are the major challenges we need to overcome to make EVs mass market in Australia?
Michelle, I think the key things in Australia for us are range anxiety, firstly, with such a broad country and large distances to drive between small towns and big cities. We need to be able to get past that range anxiety, of which a lot of cars today, we can already do that drive. We do have some charging facilities in place. However, that needs to improve. And with that, we also need to work on regulation. We have quite a volatile situation when it comes to regulations in Australia, with each state adopting different rules, and that doesn't give consumers a lot of confidence either. So I think they're probably two of the biggest things we need to overcome in this market ourselves.
Thank you. Dominic, what will the rate of transition be? Is it going to be a long drawn-out change or a faster revolution to EVs?
I think thanks, Michelle. I think the rate of transition has already gained momentum in leaps and bounds, and most manufacturers are moving towards EV platforms. And to the points of Andrew and Steve, we're in a metropolitan area. It's taking on a quicker sort of transition, and most of the clients that have transitioned into EV have said they're not visiting a petrol station ever again is one of the key factors of falling in love with the vehicle. So I think in metropolitan areas, definitely the rate of transition will be very, very, very quick.
Awesome. Now, Andrew, in that instance, what will the car park look like during the transition? How will it evolve while transitioning?
So the key difference is that we have effectively a fragmentation times 2, because we already have fragmentation with different vehicles, different body shapes taking market share in a fairly static market. And now we have electrification. So in terms of our work, collision repair, we're going to see almost a halving of particular vehicle populations, because it's a choice of whether it's electrified or not. So it makes it more complicated for the repairer, undoubtedly.
Okay, thank you. Robert, has COVID changed customer behaviors or attitudes to affect that trend in any way?
Yes, it definitely has, Michel. COVID has made customers around the world reaffirm their values and their life priorities and increase their environmental awareness. So, like Dominic said just now, who really likes going to a petrol station, really? And after all this time of lockdown, then it reminds you that petrol is also quite expensive. So people are seeing an opportunity to move away from that. And when we look at that in hard numbers, Michel, what we see is that pre-pandemic, diesels in Europe were outselling hybrid and electric vehicles 10.3 to 1. In September this year, just a couple of months ago, we were starting to see that change dramatically. And in September, diesels only outsold hybrids and electric vehicles 1.3 to 1. So an absolutely massive change. So it's brought the tipping point forward, and those manufacturers with a solid hybrid and EV offering are definitely faring better coming out of the pandemic.
All right, then, Dominic, is there a future for internal combustion engine vehicles, and obviously internal combustion vehicle body shops for the repairs?
Yes, Michelle, there will be, but the footprint of the body shop will look very different. Things to consider in an EV type situation, or EV and ICE situation, or isolation bays, HV repair bays, mixed material work bays, aluminium and carbon work bays, battery storage, hydrogen storage, and the list goes on. Training on all platforms and materials of EV is a big must. So there's a lot to consider when wanting to do mixed vehicle.
Okay, thank you. Steve, finally, what are the vehicle manufacturers working on next with the EV development?
Michelle, the first thing is increasing battery capacity. So the density of our batteries, if we look back to the original Leaf that was released, we've pretty much doubled the capacity of that battery now into the same size. So improving battery capacity is the first thing, and we might see that through things like solid-state batteries in the future. In the meantime, something that will really help us in Australia, technology that we already have in Japan, which we call e-Power. That's a series hybrid unit where we use a petrol engine in the vehicle, and it uses a generator to push charge into a high voltage battery. That high voltage battery will then power an electric motor that powers our wheels. So that gives us all of the, the great benefits of driving an EV, which for those people that have driven, it's a really exciting experience, but we completely eliminate range anxiety. And they do get very impressive fuel economy figures. They're using the power a lot smarter.
It's a very good answer. Thank you for that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a live poll now. And if you go to your screen on your right-hand side, if you go towards the live poll, it's very simple. How confident are you in taking on a medium to large EV repair today? And you've got 4 answers. You're either very confident in your ability to complete, you've got confidence in your ability to complete non-structural but not structural EV repairs, or you lack confidence in your ability to repair but you'll take the job, or you're not confident in your ability to repair and would refuse the job. So please take the time. Just tell us what your thoughts are. And meanwhile, I got to remind everyone that this webinar wouldn't be available here unless we had the support of 3M, Anest Iwata, ProSpot, and Sherwin Refinishes. Thank you again for our sponsors. And then we're going to have a quick look at the poll and see what we've done. Okay. So maybe we'll wait a little bit longer. Okay, we'll just. I've been told to take it easy a little bit because people are still polling. Maybe I'm in a hurry. Actually, while we're talking, I've just got a question for Robert. If I can ask him directly that question while we're waiting. Oh no, you've answered him already. You're very good. That was from John Bukuras. Okay, I'll leave that to.
Do you want to share the question anyway, Michel?
Yes, obviously. The question was, have you seen cost play a role in EV market growth? And Roberts answered yes, but it has been mitigated by significant increase in used car prices. Incentives really help drive sales, as he explained. Thank you for that. So now we can have a look at the poll. And I'll click on that and have a look. Okay. Now, so our polls are number one, we've got 43%. We are confident in our ability to complete only non-structural EV repairs. Number two, at 36%, is we are very confident in our ability to complete all EV repairs safely. 14% says we are not confident to repair EVs and would refuse the job. And 7% says we're not confident to repair EVs, but would take the job anyway. That's our poll. I'm going to have to ask you guys, Robert, what do you think of that?
I'm not really surprised that the most popular answer was about confidence in more cosmetic, lighter repairs than structural repairs. People see that it's just a paint repair, so what's the difference? But there are still some changes in the EV process, which we'll come to a bit later in the discussion, I'm sure. The danger sign, of course, is the bottom one. We're not confident in our ability, but we take the job anyway. And, are you really ready to repair, or are you just ready to take a chance? There's a big difference. So that would be the one that concerned me. If that was your answer, then you really, I would suggest, need to look at the business and not take those chances.
Okay, thank you. I've got to remind our listeners and our viewers today that if you have any questions, put them in the question tab. If we don't have an immediate time to answer them, we'll get back to you at the end of the webinar. So we've got some time for some Q&A towards the end of it. We're going to move to section number 2, which is how does repairing EVs affect what you do now? So we've heard from body shops on where they are with the knowledge, ability, and confidence to carry out EV repairs correctly. And from Andrew, we're going to listen to the importance of ensuring battery safety. So, Andrew, all yours.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're going to look at a slide next, just a picture. And so this is an important image. I'm concentrating on the biggest packs, the BEVs, the battery electric vehicles, because these have packs that are quite vulnerable. Famously, Tesla had an incident where, through no fault of their own, a user managed to puncture the pack from the underside with a tow hook that had fallen off another vehicle, which caused an incident. You can see in this case, it's an Audi Volkswagen Group pack. The load transition, the load transfer system for side impact runs through the battery pack. That's what the orangey ready material is in the core of the pack. So not only do we have a completely re-engineered shell with a much stiffer side frame than would be required for a conventional powertrain, we also have load transfer through the battery pack itself. Bear in mind, this is in production, and this is what Tesla are working towards as well. Most people are working towards this solution. So a major change is the value of the components, the fact that we need to take care if they're intact and functional, how they come off the vehicle, how they're initially put to sleep, because if we get it wrong, then we start to get costs trying to reawaken the system when we put it all back together again. And we're going to explore this in a moment in greater depth, but those are the keys, is that the vehicle itself has been significantly re-engineered from across the electrification piece for all 4 categories. and the biggest change has been for BEVs, and that we need to just be extremely careful because almost everything we can imagine is different about the vehicle. So I hand it back to you, Michel.
Thank you, Andrew. Obviously, what we're going to do is we're going to look at how EVs affect the repair operation. And I'm going to start with Dominic, and I'm going to ask him, with the recovery in, do we need to do anything different when receiving damaged EV recoveries?
Yes, Michelle, this is probably one of the most important aspects of an EV vehicle arriving to your workshop. All team members on site and even reception staff should be trained in EV isolation, as simply walking up to a vehicle that's been damaged could be a serious and dangerous event. All extensively damaged EV vehicles or suspect HV damage, structural damage on the vehicles should be triaged by a properly trained technician or the manufacturer prescribed technician. And should testing fail, you should contact the manufacturer immediately. These can be quite dangerous and serious events.
Thank you, Robert. At the vehicle check-in, what things need to happen at this point?
Yeah, well, Dominic's exactly right. When the vehicle arrives, that's where the problems start and multiply from there very quickly into dangerous situations. So if the customer's present, if the customer's driven the vehicle in, then obviously reassure them, tell them about what happens during the check-in process and how you make it safe for your technicians and for their vehicle. If the customer's not there with you anymore, then make sure you have identified it correctly. Fix the right high voltage signage to the vehicle, showing the vehicle status at that time. Make sure that your staff are fully briefed. You know, you can't take an electric vehicle straight onto the wash bay and blast a steam cleaner under the bonnet if the vehicle's been damaged. It's a very dangerous thing to do. And then, of course, before the vehicle goes to the workshop, make sure you've allocated the right staff to the right job. So the people with the right level of training and awareness are going to be repairing that car. Of course, not all of your staff will be trained to the same HV levels. Very often your lower trained staff will be the first people to touch that car, and your master technician level will be the fourth person to touch that car. So that's worth remembering, just to what Dominic said there, that your lower trained people will be the first people to touch the car, and it's important they are briefed and understanding the check-in process.
Thank you. Andrew, let's look at repair methods. Are they available for EV repairs, and how clear are they?
So certainly they are available. I'm already seeing the pattern that for the MHEV, the battery pack and the DC to DC converter isn't necessarily serviceable. But on the bigger packs, yes, you can absolutely strip and rebuild them. And the instructions are fairly clear. But I would question this, and this goes to the heart of strategy. I think having product training would be a great help, not just looking at the technical documents, that's essential, but to understand what the product is about and to realize that in this state of flux that we have, each vehicle has slightly different solutions. And so key electrical items are in different places, even within a single model range. So I would suggest, yes, look at the documentation, but please consider training in the context of strategy. That we can't cover everything all the time.
Thank you. Steve, the strip fit stage, how important is it to power down the car? Do we need to de-energize the car every time? And how do we know we have done that safely?
It can be completely isolated to the repair. If we have just a minor cosmetic repair as mentioned, then we can complete some of those repairs fairly safely without needing to isolate the high voltage system. However, given we have a fairly serious incident or collision, we absolutely need to make sure that the battery is isolated. That can be done pretty simply, particularly with some of our models. However, every car is going to be different. So you need to understand how that vehicle's powered down and complete it properly. The most important part of that then is to ensure it has been powered down fully. And that would be done with a high voltage multimeter. And we would check that there is no voltage coming out from the battery. And even in most cases, we would check to make sure there is no high voltage leaking into the case of the battery as well.
Thank you. And now we go to the panel stage. Dominic, is there anything different for the panel technician when repairing an EV, or is it just like everything else?
No, totally different, Michelle. And to Steve's point, the first thing we need to do is totally shut down the HV system with a correctly trained technician. Only follow manufacturer repair methods and the current manufacturer repair method. And remember, the methods are written to protect not only the occupant of the vehicle, but also the HV and battery. So a simple repair could turn out to be a complex repair, taking into account the safety measures that are put into place to protect those systems and the occupant.
Thank you. Robert, customer updates. Are EV customers different? Do we see anything new when updating them? Or are they just like everybody else?
Well, every customer wants updating, of course, but we definitely see some different things with EV customers, Michelle. They're driven by environmental awareness, but also driven by the technology. They are people generally that are interested in new technology. So that means that they have the latest phones and the latest apps, and they are very well connected to their car, much better than an ICE vehicle customer. So if we move an electric vehicle, say a Tesla, around our workshop, the app will alert the customer that an unfamiliar driver in an unfamiliar location is moving their car. So when we update them to say we've moved your car from the panel shop into the paint shop this morning, then they very often know that before we've called them, because the car has told them. So yes, you have to be aware that trust and transparency are absolutely the key. There's nowhere to hide with these connected cars, and many EVs have greater connectability than ICE vehicles.
Thank you. Now we go into the paint stage, and Steve, if I may ask you, does an EV require any changes to paint operations, or is it just you paint it like you paint every other car?
Look, I think as far as the paint application, we're still dealing with a normal vehicle. And as we mentioned in the cosmetic repairs, we don't have a big risk or change to what we do. However, you do need to look at each manufacturer and each vehicle in its own capacity, but you may need to consider, how hot are we baking these things, and take that into consideration before you do it.
Okay, I guess you can't bake them at 80%, 80 degrees.
Probably not recommended, no.
Okay. Robert is shaking his head. I can be assured then. And
yeah, Dominic will know this as well, Michelle. And you really have to plan your workshop loading, your spray booth loading for that day to allow for those reduced bake times. So you can lose those bake times during breaks or at the end of the day. Really, really important not to bake at high temperatures for extended times.
Fair enough. Andrew, back to you. The assembly stage, how do we re-energize the car, and how is it safe and correct for the handover?
So picking up on what Steve and Dominic have said, and Robert too, the recommissioning is the reverse of the decommissioning. And if it's not done properly, we could still get into trouble. So it depends on whether the system is relatively simple. In other words, it's based around a 12-volt battery, as Toyota originally did it, or more sophisticated and much more common processes now, where we not only make the system live, we then recommission the high voltage system through the diagnostic tools. So that's the key. That's what we use to go through the check routines to make sure that the whole vehicle is awake, that the electric powertrain is fully functional. Again, picking up on what Robert has just said, the customer is very, very aware of what their vehicle can do, what state it was in when they handed it over. And so they will notice if something isn't quite working or suddenly power's disappeared. So we just have to do what we normally do by recommissioning the vehicle through the diagnostic software.
Thank you for that. Now, Dominic, recharging the car. What else do we need to consider to enable this vehicle at scale?
Well, electricity supply can be a major factor, Michelle, in charging multiple vehicles and running workshop tooling. We had these problems with first generation inverter welders, and obviously everyone had to check their power supplies, but it gets to the next step when you're talking about charging 4 EV vehicles all at the same time. Wall chargers and adapters may be required, and the expectations of the customers, to Andrew and Robert's point, is it a gesture of goodwill that you've charged their vehicle, or we don't fill up a client's vehicle, or clients or guests' vehicle when they've had their vehicle repaired if they're an ICE vehicle or a petrol vehicle? Do we do that as a customer service to an EV client? It's all questions that you have to ask yourself in your body shop.
All right, Robert, quality control in valet. Is it all back to normal, or are there final changes to consider in this situation?
Well, of course, quality control is really, really important, Michel, in every repair. But again, bearing in mind, people will be very technology-led with electric vehicles. So they will be all over their car, checking it in very fine detail in our experience, really valuing the technology that they bought. When you get to valet stage, then obviously the car will be re-energized. So like Andrew said, it's a reverse of de-energizing it. So you need to make sure you're aware of the fact that car is now being re-energized and is fully charged again. And so therefore things like power washing of the bonnet again become really important to be aware of when you can't and where you can't do that. Like Dominic said, you wouldn't fill a car full of petrol and diesel to return it. So you don't always have to fully recharge your vehicle with electricity before you return it. But you have to set your own plan and your strategy and be consistent and transparent with your customers, especially with distances that you have in Australia, for example, and the range anxiety that Steve explained. You need to make sure they've got plenty of fuel, plenty of electricity for their onward journey, but you need to decide what that is. So you have to have that consistent process so the same happens every time.
Okay. So I guess the handover process doesn't need to be any different, except that the client has to be happy with the way they're receiving back their vehicle and having enough, I suppose, fuel, electricity to get going.
Yeah, definitely. I talked about trust and transparency just now, and this is your ideal moment to reinforce that trust and transparency. Again, these people will have a social circle of people just like them who are interested in environment and interested in latest technology. So they will go out and become advocates for your business and ambassadors for your business without asking for any commission, just like I mentioned in the ADAS webinar last time.
All right, gentlemen and our viewers, it's time for our second live poll, which is asking you, what is your biggest concern regarding EV repairs in your current repair operation? Is it the pre and post repairs, ensuring the staff are aware of the EV and the risks? Is it the remove and refit, ensuring cars are de-energized correctly and made safe to repair? Is it the panel, ensuring the correct repair methods are researched and followed? Or is it the paint, ensuring that the EV is not exposed to excessive heat in the oven? We'll give you a few minutes for this thing. And meanwhile, I'd like to thank our sponsors who are there to help us get this webinar up and running. 3M, Anest, Iwata, ProSpot, and Sherwin William Refinishes. We thank you so much for being our sponsors. Now, before I go back to the poll and finding out sort of what the poll results are, I just wanted to ask a quick question about the baking. I'm kind of a bit uncomfortable with the baking solutions. Robert and obviously Dominic, you are into it. You're in the middle of the operations. What I'd like to know is, are people what should I say? Are people knowledgeable in terms of how much heat you can put when you're baking a car? Are cars different baking levels? Can somebody answer this for me? Because I really want to know.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that for you, Michael. Basically, I would always consult with manufacturer repair methods because the information's there, first and foremost. Secondly, your paint manufacturer, your paint supplier can provide information to the effect of what bake cycles and what heat temperature settings you should be using on EV. So with EV, it's manufacturer, supplier of the paint product. They're the ones to go to for the information, and you won't really get led astray. You'll be able to get through the job without having too many issues, but always ask the question first.
Okay. Robert, I assume you're shaking your head positively. Yes, you agree?
Yeah, Dominic's answered it perfectly, Michel. Yeah, just if you're not sure, take advice. Don't take a chance.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I'm going to go towards our polls and just have a look at what we've got. Okay. So the biggest concern is the pre and post repair, ensuring the staff are aware. We've got 71% on that one. Our second is remove and refit, ensuring the cars are de-energized correctly and made safe for repair. This one has got 21%. And then the third one with 7% is ensuring that the EV is not exposed to excessive heat in the oven. And the panel, ensuring the correct repair methods and research and followed. Nobody seems to care about it. Everybody seems to know how to repair it in the panel shop. I need to ask, Sarah, I need to ask this one because this is amazing. Robert, what do you think? People don't care about panel beating? Are they very comfortable?
No, I don't think it's that so much, Michel, but I think there is a bit of a misunderstanding in workshops around the world that EV vehicles are a bit like ICE vehicles. You know, when you have an ignition turned off and a key out of an ICE vehicle, it's largely inert. But of course, the vehicle can still store electric charge in components. So if you haven't done a thorough check all the way through the vehicle components affected by the accident, then you could still be exposing your panel technicians. But of course, the other thing to remember on the reverse side of that is your panel technicians and your strip fit technicians are probably ones with the highest levels of training provided to them. So it comes back to what we were saying earlier, the 71% pre and post repair. These will be the staff with the least training, but where you potentially have the problems. The problems with EVs generally start at the beginning of the process, as I'm sure Don would agree.
100%. And
obviously, ensuring that the EV is not exposed to excessive heat in the oven is not too much of a concern. I thought that would be one of the most scary bit, because if you cook that battery, you're in serious trouble. Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, I guess we move to our third segment. Sorry,
Michel, I think Andrew just wanted to say.
Yeah.
I think Andrew just wanted to say.
I didn't see your hand. It was too short, Andrew.
Sorry, in and out. My apologies. I just want to quickly add. When we talk about putting the battery to sleep and re-energizing, or putting the system to sleep and re-energizing it, we have a variety of components through the system. The battery retains energy. So all we're doing is isolating the high voltage battery. So as was being mentioned several times, if that energy leaks out in any way, it's a lot of energy. It's way more than a 12-volt battery. And we know what happens if one foolishly shorts out a 12-volt battery. Just imagine a giant battery. That's what we're playing with, even with PHEV and HEV. So there are, picking up on this, that's where the danger is that there's still electricity on board. As everybody said, if it's correctly isolated at the beginning and re-energized at the end of the job, everybody's safe. But assuming in between is dangerous.
Thank you, Andrew, and apologies for not seeing the little hand that came up. We're going to go to our third segment of the program here, and we're going to look at what do we need to do to manage the change. Robert, could you please take us through?
Okay, let's start right at the start. If we move to the next slide, I'll show you a basic starter kit. So this isn't about capital investment. This isn't about technician training. This is just some core basic items, which is the absolute minimum before you should even consider getting a car into your workshop. So we'll go left to right in rows. So along the top row there, you've got a range of signage. So you need a sign that covers every single status of that vehicle throughout the repair journey. If a vehicle is going through your workshop with the same sign on it all the way through, that's a big red flag for you as the manager and owner, that those statuses are not being updated with the correct signage. So you need a range of signage, not one sign. And coming to row two, some insulated boots or shoes are required. High-V, HV specific criteria for that. You need an insulated safety helmet. It's no good having high voltage gloves on if your head then touches a live vehicle as you're reaching under the bonnet or something. So an insulated safety helmet. And then even down to the detail of gloves, you need a range of 3 types of gloves. The first ones on the left there are thin cotton gloves. These are worn underneath the high voltage gloves, and they are there to protect those gloves from inside damage through things like wedding rings and things like that on your fingers. So you put those on first. Then you put on the gloves in the middle, the high voltage gloves. These need to be Class O certified, and they need to be replaced every 6 months. So every time you open a new pair of gloves, you need to write the date on the inside so that there's always a reminder that when those gloves need replacing. As I said, 6 months lifespan on those. And then the third type of glove on the right-hand side, some heavy-duty gloves that you would wear over the top of the HV gloves, over the top of the cotton gloves when you're handling sharp edges. And they are there to prevent damage and splits and tears to the HV gloves. The little thing on the right-hand side there is a pneumatic glove inflator. So what you do is you inflate the HV gloves each time before you wear them to check there are no minor cracks or splits or holes that you weren't aware of. So you inflate the gloves and you check them and inflated that they are completely sealed before you wear them and start the car. Coming down to row 3, some flash resistant, arc resistant overalls, goggles and a face visor are self-explanatory, I guess, but it'd be worth having some specific EV ones always available publicly for everyone in the business. It's no good having those locked away in a toolbox while a technician goes away on holiday. So think about some EV specific ones available immediately to all. And then you have an insulated safety hook. Some of these vehicles are direct current. So if someone does get electrified, they of course can't let go of the vehicle. And as a human reaction, you want to turn around and grab them and pull them off. If you were to do that, then you also as a second person would be connected to that vehicle. So you need to have an insulated safety hook. And again, just like fire extinguishers, it should be mapped and shown and everyone should know where they are. An insulated safety mat, that's used in conjunction with your safety boots and safety shoes, not instead of. And then some accredited training. Don't just go to the cheapest, the most local training. Really think about the training you're investing in. For your staff, as we said earlier, all staff will need training. And then coming along the bottom row, a multimeter so that you can always test the electric charge that's available, an insulated set of tools with insulated handles, infrared thermometer there. This allows you to check for chemical reactions in batteries, especially in signs of thermal activity. Then you have an isolation padlock. This is so that once the vehicle's been isolated, you can lock it down and no one can just be tempted to try and restart that vehicle when they're not aware of the status of the vehicle. So that means that the person who owns that key is the qualified person to make that decision whether that car can be restarted or not. And then finally on the right hand side, just some immediate quarantine equipment like a retractable belt or a plastic chain in that example there. So as soon as a vehicle arrives, you can immediately cone it off until it's been signed and labeled properly. So that is the minimum EV starter kit before you even consider getting one of those vehicles into your workshop, Michel.
Thank you, Robert. Now we understand how it affects the repair operations and the basic equipment level from Robert. Let's look at what we need to do to manage the changes in those operations. Steve, if I may ask you, if we want to do EV repairs, what things should we consider in our strategy?
The key word there, Michel, is strategy. You need to have one. As we've already discussed, EVs are coming. They're not going to go away. So you really need to think about when is the right time for you and your business to get into EV repairs. When is it going to be right in terms of return on investment? As we just saw, just the minimum starter kit is a significant investment. And then we also discussed, is your site suitable as far as the power supply? Charging equipment also isn't expensive. So I think the key word, as I said, strategy. Think about how is your business going to get into EV. It's not a matter of if, but when, and really take careful consideration into how you invest and look at what technologies are coming. What is going to be the key technology in your area and in your car park?
Thank you. I'm going to ask Andrew here. Do we have to change anyway? Or can we just carry on doing on EV vehicles?
So it's perfectly acceptable to consider not doing electrified vehicles. It's just to then consider that the park will gradually diminish, the business opportunity will diminish. It will certainly change. and it may transition into a kind of restoration come classic market in time. So we need to think about the strategy about how to make sure that's successful for the business if we choose that path. Alternatively, if we say we're going to do everything all the time anyway, I think that is going to be extremely difficult to deliver profitably. So as Steve just mentioned, strategy is all. We have to make some key decisions about the scale of investment, the opportunity in the market, where we think it's going to go, and plan accordingly.
Thank you, Andrew. Dominic, just jumping onto this, can a body shop continue to repair everything like EVs, hybrids, and ICE vehicles?
Michelle, as stated earlier, the footprint, training, access to manufacturing information, all this will get dictated by this. Mixed material repair areas throughout the workshop. You could have carbon area, alloy area, mixed use area, steel area. It gets costly, and also another factor to that is the training that comes with it, because each manufacturer has a different training platform, and so it can get very costly to set up overall, especially when you've got storage bays for battery, storage bay for hydrogen coming, dedicated work areas. It can change the game, that's for sure.
Thank you. Robert, you're in the same business. What are the typical direct and indirect benefits for the market leaders in EV repairs?
Okay, well, a typical direct benefit would be that it gives you the opportunity to move from being a commodity repairer, one of a dozen repairers in the town doing exactly the same thing essentially, to becoming a specialist repairer or a specialized repairer, to really become famous for your niche of being the EV repairer in the town. And of course, that can command different rates and for the different levels of knowledge and investment that you have. Indirectly, then obviously communicating that quality, that investment, that cutting edge capability in your business does attract other customers and other work providers to you, because they think, well, if they can do that, they can probably do my 5, 6, 7-year-old ICE vehicle pretty well too. So it still establishes you as a business in the community as being at the forefront of the technology in the industry. So both direct and indirect benefits are definitely there, Michel.
Thank you. Steve, if I may ask you, in terms of staff, who needs to be trained on EVs and to what level for them to be safe and confident?
I think we touched on this earlier. Everyone in the business needs to have a minimum awareness of EVs, the safety that comes with that, and the risks if we don't understand EVs. Furthermore, you need to have technicians working on your vehicles to have a full understanding. And then, as Dominic's also mentioned, there's different manufacturers will have different processes. So everyone needs it, but you may look to specialize particular people within the business around what they're doing in EVs. The simple thing is, though, everyone in the business has to have an understanding.
Awesome. Now we go back to Dominic. Training, Dominic. How do you plan and how do you structure it, and what should be training including? Okay.
Well, the first thing I would start with when you're getting into EV is first aid training. I think this is really important. It's including defibrillator training if you can get access to it or purchase one for your workshop. Most training is conducted by the manufacturer or a manufacturer-appointed training institute such as ICAR. Scheduling training can be a mammoth task, but collating or creating a training matrix has definitely helped our business. And group training sessions, I know it sounds funny, group training sessions, not on the beers, but proper groups training session to understand where we're heading with EV and interacting with the manufacturer really builds team morale and gets people in the right mindset in repairing EV.
Thank you for that. Now, Andrew, with existing equipment, is everything we have okay to use, or do we need to consider anything?
We need to look at it all again. So, for example, again, concentrating on the most exotic, the battery electric vehicle, these vehicles, type for type, gain anywhere from 300 to 500 kilos of vehicle unladen weight. So suddenly our lift may not have enough lift capacity. We need to be wary about the manufacturer-specific tooling, particularly in terms of EV electrification, because the overall investment, when we take into account training, is significant. So we shouldn't just pay out on the off chance we then go shopping for business. We should be thinking about the business opportunity and therefore how much investment does it require in order to realize that. It keeps coming back to strategy. So no, we can't just accept everything we've got. We don't necessarily have to throw away anything, but we have to carefully consider each new thing that we buy.
Thank you. And obviously talking about something new to buy, Robert, new equipment. Now, what should we be aware of in getting new equipment?
Well, Andrew's answered that really, really well, and that is making sure that when you identify some equipment upgrades or some new equipment that's required, it's being aware of why you're buying it. How does it align to your strategy? The trap that a lot of people have fallen into around the world with EV equipment is they bought it because the body shop down the road bought it, or because the salesman said they needed it. And we've already got this sort of position in body shops way back in time, haven't we? Where everyone's got a bit of equipment or a welder or whatever it was that they bought, where they've never really got the best from it. And you don't want to go through all of that wastage again on the back of a pandemic. So invest time in making sure your new equipment is aligned to a strategy, and make sure, as Andrew said, you're going through everything: axle stands, trolley jacks, ramps, recovery trucks, PPE. Everything needs to be reassessed in the context of electric vehicles.
Thank you. Andrew, I'm going to come back to you. What space is required to manage EV repairs, and what do they need to consider in all departments?
Yes, I think Dominic and Steve and Robert have got better answers to give than I have. But in essence, because the battery, so if we have a thermal event with a petrol or diesel vehicle, it is burning and gone within minutes. And to put it out, usually within the hour, it's done. If we have a thermal event with a battery, particularly a larger battery pack, that could go on for days. And the intensity of the heat is incredible. We're talking sort of 1700 degrees Celsius peak, something like that. So in that, because of those reasons, because we're uncertain about if we've got a damaged vehicle, particularly if the battery pack has been damaged, the vehicle needs to be quarantined, so it needs area around it. It needs to be away from our main building during storage. And as the vehicle is taken apart, so we're assessing the quality, the extent of the damage on the components, and segregating those. For example, battery storage, again, because they're relatively valuable, indeed most of the electrical system has quite a high value, needs to be taken care of. So that impacts on the extent of the racking and other stuff that needs to be provided. So the bottom line is we need more space in order to process the vehicle, which means we need to be more profitable, more efficient in the use of our floor space, because we have less floor space to fill.
Okay, thank you. Steve, very briefly, reinvestment. What should they reinvest in, and how much will it cost, and how can they give themselves the best chance of a return on their investment?
Again, the minimum EV starter kit, that's where we would start off for the safety side of things and for your PPE. Outside of that, you need to look at your facilities, look at what charging equipment are we going to install, if we are, and is the site up to it. Outside of that, we spoke about this as well, but invest in your people training. That's going to be another big investment, and probably one of the most important of those.
Thank you. Dominic, do we compete with our competitors to repair EVs, or do we diversify? Which is the best?
This is a question that each body shop manager and owner will have to ask themselves, Michel. It's what's the local market doing? As the cost on equipment and training can sometimes be very expensive and time-consuming and ongoing. It keeps coming. New tooling, new training platforms, new vehicle. That it's cost after cost after cost, and you have to be prepared for that. But it is something to definitely. It is the way of the future, and there's no doubt about that.
Thank you. We're on the hour already, and I hope our viewers can stay with us a little bit longer. We've got time, so we're going to continue. And I'm going to ask Andrew, how can EV repairs affect the body shop's profitability?
So if we simply just go ahead, steam ahead, and maybe do it retrospectively, understand what we have to do as we're going along, then we quickly find out the amount of workspace is reduced because the amount of space required per vehicle is increased. So literally, an EV might take up 2+ vehicle bays. So this is where we have problems in terms of profitability. So we have to be super careful about how we process the vehicle. We're looking at increasing efficiency between stages of repair in order to recover that profitability.
Yeah.
Thank you. Robert, is there any benefit in educating the customer, increasing their awareness of EVs?
Yeah, definitely, Michel. A massive benefit, of course there is. But we should be marketing our business to our customers anyway. EV is just the latest opportunity for us all to do that. We're reaching the tipping point around the world where electric vehicles and hybrids are really starting to become mass market, be seen on the roads every day. And so we've got this sort of demographic out there where their next vehicle is going to be a hybrid or an EV. They might have one now, but definitely their next vehicle. They're starting to see themselves becoming an EV hybrid customer. So it's no good waiting until they've got that to then start to market the fact you can do it. You need to build your brand positioning now so that when they get to that point for themselves, they're already seeing you as the established EV experts in their community.
Okay. Dominic, how do we manage the pace of change effectively and sustainably?
I think you work to your shop strengths and build your knowledge on EV and hybrid technology first. Ask questions first. Don't just assume with EV. We can get into this world where we start assuming with EV that it's like an ICE vehicle. Don't assume. Ask the question. Continue. Know that EV and hybrid repair is possible with the correct manufacturer's repair methods and repair instructions and training. And I think the key of it is don't be scared. Be very cautious with EV repair, but don't be scared of it, because fear and being scared of it can make you miss one of those steps that you've learned in your training, and it could be, critical. So don't be scared of it. Be very cautious.
All right, thank you for that. My favorite question is to Steve here. What happens if the EV transition plan changes? What contingency plans are available?
It's a business by business thing, Michel, and you really need to look at your business plan. You should have a solid and structured business plan specifically for you. As we know, there's significant investments required, and with any business plan, you should be looking at risk management and consider, where is the income going to come from? Are we going to put all our eggs in the basket of EV, or is the transition going to leave us an opportunity for income with ICE vehicles still? It's something that is going to change. We know any business plan does, but really, really focus on having a significantly strong business plan that looks towards the future and manages those risks that might come with it.
Thank you. And gentlemen, thank you for these questions and answers. Obviously, I'm sending you the questions, you give me the answers. We're going to go for a live poll, our third live poll of the session. And that is, what is your biggest priority that you need to complete to enable you to manage EV repairs? Is it the equipment? I don't have the equipment or entry levels item needed. Is it the investment? I will need to find and afford the investment required for me to do EV repairs. Or is it staffing? I will need to train existing staff or recruit new staff for EV repairs. And last but not least is strategy. I need a strategy for EV repairs. I don't have one that manages any of this yet. So, ladies and gentlemen, after your keyboard, if you can just have a look at the live poll on your right-hand side, tell us what you think, your thoughts, and we'll come back to that in about a minute. Meanwhile, again, I need to thank our sponsors who are there for us, and without them, we wouldn't have this webinar. 3M, Anest Iwata, ProSpot, and Sherwin William Refinishes. Thank you so much for being behind our webinars. I'm going to have a quick look at the polls because time is not with us at the moment. So I'll just have a quick to see how we're going. Okay, a lot of people have already voted. Okay. I think those who wanted to vote have voted. All right, I'm going to have a quick look at the vote. So number one is on 67% is I need a strategy. And I knew that was going to be the number one because strategy is what everybody's been pushing. We need a strategy for EV repairs. Number two is staffing. We need to train the staffing or recruit them. And number three, together, is the equipment and the funds, both on 8%. And this is obviously something that people think seriously about and they feel uncomfortable about. Now, I'm going to go back to our panelists and I'm going to ask a couple of questions. I'm going to start with Robert. Robert, what are your thoughts of our polling today?
Yeah, I think that's a really accurate poll, that one. I think that's really reflective of what we're seeing in the markets in Australia, but also around the world with IBIS. I think that poll would look actually pretty similar wherever you ask that around the world. It's really good to see that it shows a good level of awareness and prioritization to me.
All right. Does everybody else agree with these with the poll? Is anybody doesn't agree that strategy is number one?
I think it's spot on, Michel.
Okay, Steve agrees. Well, obviously you had the final push with the strategy, and I agree with you. I'm sure Dominic agrees from a body shop repair.
Definitely.
In every business, if you don't have a strategy, you don't go anywhere. Whatever you do, especially when you're tackling something huge like EVs. Andrew, please, your
just to very quickly say the strategy is not about rushing away to find a specialist to help. It's about thinking it through, because a lot of body shops, if they approach it from the position of how do I make money, then it begins to generate the questions that have to be addressed. So it's a lot about thinking for oneself in the first step, which is not necessarily very expensive to do, but super important.
Okay, I agree with that. Now, it's time for us to do a quick Q&A because we're a bit past time. We have a question here from Gavin McGay to Dominic specifically, asking, I'm curious to know if the EV procedures being presented to the insurer in relation to EV starter kits and extended processes and costs, are they being accepted or are they being challenged by the insurer?
Okay, so I believe it's something that you invest in. First, your investment translates to the estimate. Obviously, you have to sort of return on investment, but there is charges such as disengaging the electrical system that you can put on your estimate. You can access to decommissioning that electrical point. There's otherwise you build your quote pretty much similar to an ICE vehicle. The only other things that you're adding are disengaging and following the correct repair method. Obviously, like I said earlier, if the repair method dictates to protect the battery and it becomes a larger repair, then obviously that will translate in that cost. So I hope that answers your question, Gavin. It's built into the quote, and most insurance companies are understanding of that.
Awesome, thank you for that. We have another question from Jason Truan from iCar, specifically to Andrew. Could you please explain your thoughts on what the roles of a body technician will be in the future relating to EVs? What will their limitation be, or will the business need to employ specialist technicians to deal with these types of vehicles?
So the answer is that the training is across the piece. It's all areas of the business. It's not necessarily all staff. Ideally, it would be, but it is certainly the majority of staff, and certainly enough to cover the throughput of EV. So if the business goes to EV exclusively, then I would suggest everybody in the business needs to have a level of awareness. If it's going to be everything comes in through the front door, then it's going to be streamed. There'll be a certain proportion of the business covering sickness and all that stuff that will be able to handle an EV on any day and know what to do. So short answer is that it's, I think we've covered it before in our discussion, is that it's everybody from front of house right the way through strip, paint, panel, the whole lot. Everybody needs to know.
Robert, I'm sorry I missed you there before. You wanted to answer the original question that Gavin has put through. Please go ahead.
Yeah, very quickly, Michel, echo what Dominic said. Gavin, great question. And to just build on what Dominic said, we have to remember that electric vehicles are starting to hit the market without any revision to any work provider contracts. So these contracts exist between work providers and body shops, and they were written pre-EVs being in the market. So therefore, things like the SLAs and the charging price menu, things like the electric vehicle processes are not in there. And therefore, the engineer is being paid to audit your estimate against that contract. But that contract may be out of date and not include these things. So we have to understand sometimes the body shop's knowledge about EV repair process is more than that work provider engineer. So you have to communicate that well. They pay for evidence, as we said in the ADAS webinar. They don't pay for truth or your correct opinion. So you need to have all of that information to hand when you're compiling that estimate to give them the evidence of what is required. And like Dominic said, starting with manufacturing methods is absolutely the way.
That's correct.
Thank you, Robert. We just got a nice question from Riaz Ahmed Sheikh, who's asking, are manufacturers coming up with providing roadworthiness certificates post major repair? That's one of the question. I'm going to ask Andrew this one because it's right up his alley.
I was just writing the answer. Okay, so the answer is no. I don't think they are providing certificates. However, one thing we do need to be aware of, the vehicle is talking to the manufacturer the whole time. So if we don't do a job properly as a collision repairer, if we miss something, if we leave some errors in the system, the vehicle will tell the manufacturer. So that in long way round, the vehicle will highlight deficiencies. So forgive me, this was mentioned when we did our earlier chats. This is not from me. The battery pack is, I know the battery pack is communicating with base all the time. And if it sits around for a very long time and it's on minimum charge, it will say, hey, I need more energy. If we don't know that's happening, then the manufacturer does. So this is really the big story that comes out of this, is that because of connectivity, the manufacturer knows how well we've repaired the vehicle.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's a great answer. And we got a question from Murray Howell from Sherwin Williams. And that's a very good question. Are the insurer assessors well trained in EV repair methods? I'm going to ask Dominic this question because he's right up on the coalface.
Okay, so yeah, look, you like any insurance assessor entering any of our body shops, we're dealing with guys that have had a lot of exposure, and we're also dealing with guys that haven't had much exposure at all. I think to Robert's point, to Andrew's point, if you've got your information there, you've collated it, you've written the estimate, and you can verify what they need to verify back to their superiors, I think you don't have an issue with what you're putting on your quote. Obviously, justification and having the manufacturer's repair methods and explaining it, instead of a 5-minute assessment, it may take 20 to 30 minutes to go through it, but it will get a result that both of you are sure of and can both move on and repair the customer and guest's motor vehicle.
Thank you for that nice answer. Gentlemen, we're really running out of time. I really thank you for being with us today. I'm going to ask you very briefly to give me a closing argument. 30 seconds. Starting with you, Andrew, because you're very eager to tell us what your thoughts are in 30 seconds.
Just about. I would say that we have to be aware the vehicle is everything. The vehicle is constantly changing. Even within a model range, there are changes going on all the time, so we can make no assumptions. We have to research fresh each time a collision repair comes in for repair. Armed with information, there's not really much to be worried about. So with training and information, we're good.
Thank you. Steve, if you can give me your thoughts from your end of the stick.
I think try and stay up to date with what's coming. There's new EVs coming every month, and the speed in which that's going to happen will increase ever so quick. So keep an eye on things like what models are coming out, what technologies. We still don't have a lot of synergy between what charger types each vehicle has, and I think we're going to see that change. So try and stay current and look towards what's coming in the future, because it will come very quickly.
Thank you very much. Dominic, your thoughts?
Yeah, Michelle, I would say once you have your correct manufacturer's training and set up your workshop in an EV repair, don't be afraid of the unknown. Look to it as the future of your trade and craft, and be confident in your training and your work. That's what I would close with. The future looks bright. So,
thank you. Last but not least, our own Robert, your thoughts?
I think any serious body shop that has a future in this industry is going to be repairing electric vehicles. It's as simple as that. So you really got to understand, are we ready to repair, or are we ready to just take chances? We talked about strategy today. Hope is not a strategy. So you need to get clarity in your vision and your intent with electric vehicles in your business and why you're making that decision. Put a strategy in place that everybody buys into and believes in, and then take your people, your customers, and your business partners with you on that EV journey. That is the way to get the best return from your electric vehicle investments.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you all for your cooperation today. We really appreciate it, and I'm going to give the microphone to Albert.
Thank you, Michel. And that brings us to the end of the October 2021 BodyShop News webinar. I would like to thank our panelists for that very insightful discussion. Thank you, Robert Snook from BSG Global, MG Cannon and IBIS, Andrew Marsh from Ezi-Methods, Dominic Mazzeo from B&A Motor Body Repairs, Steve Harvey from Nissan Australia, and our moderator and BodyShop News publisher, Michel Malik. And thanks to all of you, our audience, for coming today to participate. Our next webinar is scheduled for Thursday, 3 February 2022 at 4 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. So we hope we'll see you with us again for another insightful discussion. Again, I want to thank our sponsors, 3M, Anest, Iwata, ProSpot, and Sherwin-Williams Automotive Finishes. It wouldn't have been possible to bring you all of this today without their support, so thank you very much. We'll have this webinar up on our website so you can watch it again at a later date. Just go to bodyshopnews.net/webinars soon to watch again. Thank you again for coming, and good night.